Now, let's say you have a client who loves it here, and they bought a house from you, and a year later they said, you know what, I love it, but I don't want to be here for more than 6 months. What do I do? That is typically when they call me. So a lot of times, my clients have already been working with you all for a year or more before they even see me, because they only come to me after they decided that they love it here and they want to stay. So what my firm does is we come up with different strategies that help them stay. Probably one of the most common one is another stepping stone on the river across, the immigration river, and it's called the E-2 investor visa. That is a real common vehicle that we use for foreign people who want to stay longer. To qualify, there has to be a treaty between the U.S. and the person's home country. There are treaties with a lot of countries, but not every country. So most of Europe has a treaty, but not, unfortunately, Brazil, not Russia, not China. The E-2 investor visa usually allows people to spend up to 5 years here and can be renewed every 5 years, but the person has to invest in a U.S. business. They either have to buy one that already exists or start one from scratch.
Is this the $500,000 rule?
No. That's a green card that I'll tell you about in a minute, and there's a lot of times people get confused. So the E-2 investor visa, they have to own a controlling interest in an active U.S. business. And by active, I mean it's got to sell some type of product or service to the public, and it could be newly active, like they just opened it, or it could be one where they're purchasing an existing business. So the ballpark number that we give people is around 100,000 is typically enough to qualify. The regulations are actually a little bit more complicated because it's more of a sliding scale based on what the total amount of the investment is. They want to see a certain percentage test is met. But usually, if they invest around 100,000, that'll be enough to qualify them. So this visa is generally approved for 5 years, and you can renew it as long as you continue to have that business, as long as you continue to qualify. It's not a green card.
Rental properties?
I was just going to answer. That's the second most often asked question for me, and that is, how can real estate be used to qualify for one of these E-2 visas? And the one thing I can tell you is, years ago, it used to be enough to say have 4 rental properties or an apartment building with 4 units. That was often enough for somebody to qualify. And you would think that our government would be responsive enough to encourage foreign investment by allowing E-2 visa holders to qualify based on that type of investment. But generally speaking, just rental properties alone hasn't worked for the E-2. Maybe seeing a little bit of a thaw, but for the most part, that generally doesn't work. And the main reason why is sometimes the embassies say that's not an active business because you don't really need to be here full time to rent 4 units once a year. The other reason why is one of the requirements for the E-2 visa is that you have to show that the business helps our economy. And the government's test, it's called the marginality test, is they want to see that the business will either create jobs for U.S. workers or can produce more than what the investor needs to live, to support himself or herself and the family. So even if the investor is a multimillionaire and doesn't care whether the business loses money, our government says we want to see that the business is going to be helping our economy before we give you this visa. So just rental properties alone generally fails either the active requirement or the marginality requirement. But you still can incorporate real estate in an overall E-2 investment strategy, and that's something that I try to tell my clients, because I do believe it's a good investment. A lot of times it's a better investment than spending $300,000 on a new franchise that's not tested. So, for example, and I know you're probably all more into residential real estate, but a person can purchase commercial property for their business. That's a way to do it. Seasonal rentals in certain areas, if they're allowed in this county, can work, because that's requires a lot more activity. The government says, okay, you've got to be here year-round to get to have that go. Also, we've had success with the business of buying, renovating, and selling. So you're not buying and holding, but you're renovating and selling, and then because that requires you to be here year-round to oversee the renovations and pick out the next property. So real estate can definitely be a part of an E-2 strategy.